In a world where social interactions seem unavoidable, many of us have at least once felt alienated, as if watching a complex game from the sidelines. Have you ever wondered why so many people strive to conform to accepted norms, adjusting to the expectations of those around them? If such thoughts have crossed your mind, perhaps it's time to face the truth. Arthur Schopenhauer, known for his pessimistic view of the world, once remarked that most people live in a kind of farce. They choose clothes, mannerisms, and speech not based on their true preferences, but on a desire for approval. But an important question arises. Approval from whom? Think about how often you engage in meaningless conversations, just to avoid being accused of rudeness. How many times have you feigned laughter at jokes that didn't interest you at all? Doesn't it seem like every social interaction turns into a transaction where you have to sacrifice a part of your individuality for a sense of belonging? Stay with us to find out where these reflections will lead. But at what cost does insight come? Arthur Schopenhauer once observed that intelligence and social life are in constant conflict. The higher the level of intelligence, the clearer the meaninglessness of worldly vanity becomes, and it's not about arrogance at all. It's just that a sharp mind is able to see what is hidden from most. He sees the masks worn, the lies skillfully veiled by politeness, and realizes the fragility of a world where everyone desperately seeks approval in the eyes of others. And the saddest thing is that most prefer to turn a blind eye to it. Society is designed to entertain, not to encourage reflection. After all, when a person starts to think too much, he inevitably notices the incoherence around him. He begins to realize that most relationships are superficial, conversations are empty and meaningless, and the desire to fit into society at all costs is nothing more than a form of self-destruction. This is the dilemma. Possessing enough intelligence to see all this, a person inevitably faces the loneliness that this knowledge brings. After all, the deeper the reflections, the harder it is to find your place in the world, and people feel it. Those around you feel when an individual does not succumb to the general panic and does not blindly follow social rituals. This causes them discomfort, since the very presence of such a person calls into question the illusory world in which they live. Arthur Schopenhauer argued that loneliness is the lot of outstanding minds. This hurts because society instills that happiness lies in communication, friends, and belonging to groups. But what if most of these connections are meaningless? What if the realization of the price of socialization is the rejection of identity? In this case, a person begins to look for something more, moves away, and values his time more than the approval of others. And here, something amazing happens. Loneliness, which at first seemed like a burden, turns into an advantage. It is in solitude that what society tries to hide is revealed: inner peace and harmony with oneself. Arthur Schopenhauer, an outstanding thinker, deeply understood the duality of intelligence, understanding that it is both a gift and a burden. The deeper a person understands the structure of the world, the less he finds in it a response for his soul. The clearer he sees human nature, with all its weaknesses and vices, the less desire he has to participate in generally accepted social games. In this context, it is important to avoid the common misconception that this is a call to misanthropy, an incitement to hatred of humanity, or a rejection of social ties. On the contrary, the essence lies in realizing the fine line between superficial interaction and deep involvement. A person must give himself the right to decide for himself when and with whom to communicate, instead of blindly following social expectations and prescriptions. It is about recognizing the fact that true intelligence does not need external confirmation of its value. The most interesting thing is that when an individual stops seeking approval from the outside, cardinal changes occur in his inner world. The people around him begin to notice his independence and self-confidence. They see that he does not desperately try to fit into other people's frameworks, that he does not depend on their approval, and that his world will not collapse if he is not invited to the next social event. People are confused by indifference to public opinion, because most of them have become addicted to universal attention, recognition, and approval. Someone who refuses to play by these rules becomes an incomprehensible mystery that is both frightening and enticing. The paradox is that the less a person strives for social confirmation, the more power he gains over it. True freedom comes when the anxiety about what others think disappears. Therefore, the next time someone advises you to be more sociable, put more effort into communication, and conform to accepted norms, remember, the problem is not with you. You simply saw a truth that is too uncomfortable for many to accept. And here the most interesting thing begins. Realizing that social confirmation is not a necessity, and learning that most interactions are just a theatrical performance, a person begins to notice silence. In a world where cacophony has become the norm, where social networks, empty conversations, and news aimed at causing violent emotions strive to constantly distract attention, silence becomes a powerful ally which worries many. After all, silence encourages reflection, and reflection, as you know, can be dangerous. Arthur Schopenhauer, deeply aware of this, chose the path of solitude, dedicating his life to philosophy, music, and contemplation. His choice was dictated not by hatred of society, but by an understanding that worldly vanity only clouds the mind. The key distinction that is often overlooked is the difference between loneliness and isolation. Loneliness is a conscious choice, an act of strength, a preference for depth over superficiality, quality over quantity. Isolation, on the other hand, is the lot of those who crave recognition but cannot find their place, who strive for acceptance but remain unattached. This is the paradox of human existence. He who craves universal recognition is doomed to disappointment, while the conscious rejection of the pursuit of approval opens the way to true loneliness. Those who have chosen the path of independence, not seeking to please everyone they meet, attract those who are truly important, thinking people who ask questions and do not need to constantly fill their lives with meaningless noise. Intelligence is not synonymous with antisocial behavior. Rather, it rejects superficiality and triviality. Let us recall the great geniuses of the past. They were not hermits, but they did not waste precious time on empty talk. Leonardo da Vinci, absorbed in his research, did not feel the need to share every thought with those around him. Friedrich Nietzsche, realizing the gap between his thinking and accepted norms, preferred solitude. Nikola Tesla worked on his inventions with a maniacal obsession that was incomprehensible to most. They were all perceived as eccentric, strange, and complex personalities. The reason lies in their non-compliance with accepted standards, in their refusal to follow the prescribed scenario of social life. After all, in essence, social life is a series of predictable rituals designed to keep the individual within the system. From birth, a person is taught that recognition by society is the highest value, that having friends is necessary, that belonging to a group is important, and that isolation is something negative. However, the fact is that many of these social groups are formed out of fear of loneliness, and not on the basis of genuine closeness. Many people surrounded by a wide circle of communication experience inner emptiness. The greatest ideas, revolutionary breakthroughs, and most important discoveries are born in the minds that dare to distance themselves from the general vanity. But here a common misconception arises. Some believe that the solution lies in completely denying society, in turning into a hermit, cut off from the world and living in isolation. But this is the wrong path. The true power of personality is manifested not in the desire to escape from reality, but in the ability to reasonably assess situations and choose the optimal moment for interaction with the outside world. True strength lies in the ability to remain in the shadows when the hustle and bustle becomes unbearable, and to resolutely declare yourself when it is really necessary. Let us recall outstanding strategists. They were not always at the epicenter of battles, but their appearance on the battlefield always had a decisive impact. People with a deep understanding of life do not become either submissive slaves of society or hermits avoiding it. They prefer to remain invisible players, quietly moving their pieces on the chessboard of fate. They build their creations in solitude, and when the world finally realizes their existence, it is too late, because they have already won victory without attracting unnecessary attention. Arthur Schopenhauer argued that high intelligence implies a tendency to loneliness, but not as a punishment, but rather as a valuable advantage. It is in solitude that a person finds the opportunity to create something truly meaningful and lasting. But what happens to those who do not realize this truth? What awaits those who mistakenly believe that happiness can only be found in the approval of others? People found themselves in the insidious captivity of a vicious circle of dependence on social networks. Every uploaded image, every published story, and every expressed opinion is subordinate to one goal: to elicit a response, whether it be a like, a comment, or any other manifestation of approval that gives a fleeting sense of significance and confirms their existence. However, the harsh reality is this: if your self-awareness and sense of being are entirely dependent on the approval of others, then you are not living an authentic life, but are merely a reflection of other people's expectations and ideas. This state is the direct opposite of freedom. True freedom lies not in unlimited permissiveness and the absence of consequences for one's actions, but in independence from other people's opinions and approval when realizing one's own desires. This is the ability to do without constant noise and bustle in order to feel alive. The ability to enjoy solitude in silence, without experiencing anxiety and without seeking to fill every pause with distracting factors. If a person does not possess this ability, he is not free, but remains a prisoner of information noise. Arthur Schopenhauer deeply understood this problem and deliberately distanced himself from society, viewing this not as a manifestation of misanthropy, but as a conscious strategy of self-preservation and achieving inner harmony. Only by distancing yourself from the hustle and bustle can you gain the ability to see the world in its true light, and only in silence can you hear the voice of your own I. If a person has reached such an awareness, then in the depths of his soul there is already a growing understanding that something is fundamentally wrong in modern life. Many social interactions seem like empty formalities, and genuine growth occurs not in the noise and bustle, but in the process of self-knowledge and reflection. Now the question arises before a person: will he have the courage to accept this truth? After all, having taken this step, there will be no turning back. Small talk will begin to seem unbearable and absurd. The need to fit into accepted frameworks will disappear, and only the naked truth will remain. The truth that loneliness is not a punishment, but a valuable gift, a privilege available only to those who are strong enough to endure it. It is no longer possible to deceive yourself. You cannot force yourself to enjoy what once seemed normal. You cannot pretend that empty conversations bring satisfaction, or that the approval of others has any weight. There comes a moment when there is no turning back, and this realization can fill you with awe. After all, how many lives are lived in the pursuit of conformity, in the silent sacrifice of oneself for the sake of recognition? How many times do people extinguish the sparks of their own individuality, just so as not to disturb the peace of others? But now that the veil has fallen, there will be no return to the past. The truth is revealed, incomprehensible to many. The meaning of life is not to dissolve into the crowd, but to find what ignites the inner fire, and boldly follow this call, even if the road leads in solitude. And here is the cruel paradox. The bolder a person manifests his true essence, the stronger he attracts others to himself. In a world languishing from falsehood, authenticity becomes a priceless treasure. People crave it, but only a few have the courage to be themselves. Those who move forward without knowing fear, those who do not need external approval, it is they who become beacons that others follow. But not because they strive for power, but because true freedom is a phenomenon so rare and captivating that it is simply impossible not to notice it. The author addresses the reader with a direct question, forcing them to think about further actions after receiving certain information. He emphasizes that ignoring or pretending that nothing happened is an unacceptable option. Continuing to participate in the imposed farce and adapting to someone else's form is the path of least resistance, but it leads to the loss of one's own individuality. Instead, the author suggests choosing a more difficult path, accepting the discomfort of truth. This means being ready for misunderstanding from the majority, refusing to betray oneself in order to conform to other people's expectations, and starting to live for oneself, not for others. There are two types of people in the world: those who adapt and those who find themselves. Most choose adaptation because of its simplicity and safety, but it is the few who choose the path of self-determination who leave a significant mark on history. The author asks a rhetorical question about which type of person the reader belongs to. He calls on those who have reached the end to leave a comment with the phrase, "Silence is power," emphasizing that understanding this phrase is the key to playing the game of life according to your own rules. This is a call to awareness and readiness to resist the pressure of society in order to remain true to oneself. In conclusion, if the presented material has caused you to reflect, and you have found that my words reflect your own, previously unspoken perception, I invite you to join the channel, because this is only the starting point. See you in the next issue.